What happens when the only power that can save a dying king is the one magic forbidden to all wolves? For Nyx Shadowin, life in the Emberfell pack meant 26 years of existing in the margins. She was Omega-born in a pack that feared darkness in all its forms, a wolf who'd never shifted, who spent her days in the healing halls learning herbs and her nights dreaming of shadows that called to her. Her scent, lavender and morning dew and wildflowers, was ordinary, but the darkness that seemed to follow her was not. They whispered that she was touched by shadow, that her eyes held depths no Omega should possess, that sometimes when she walked past, the lights dimmed and shadows grew longer. The pack elders said shadow magic was forbidden, cursed, a remnant of the dark age when wolves nearly destroyed themselves. Anyone caught practicing it faced execution. So Nyx learned to hide what she was, to suppress the shadows that wanted to dance at her fingertips, to pretend she was just another powerless Omega. But when Alpha Rowan Ashcroft publicly rejected her as his fated mate during the eclipse ceremony, declaring that he would not be bound to an Omega tainted by shadow, everything changes. The rejection doesn't just sever their bond, it detonates the magical bindings that have kept her power locked away since birth. And what happens next, no one was prepared for. Not Rowan, not the Emberfell pack, and certainly not Nyx herself, who would soon discover that the forbidden shadow magic she'd been hiding her entire life was the only thing that could save the cursed Alpha King, Magnus Shadowbane, the dying ruler whose soul was being consumed by an ancient darkness. Because sometimes the thing the world fears most is exactly what it needs to survive. And sometimes the power everyone calls evil is the only power strong enough to fight true darkness. Nyx was about to steal forbidden magic from the most dangerous place in existence, master powers that had been banned for 1,000 years, and use them to save a king who shouldn't exist. And in doing so, she would become something the world hadn't seen in centuries, the Shadow-born Queen. The eclipse ceremony happened once every decade, when the moon swallowed the sun and day turned to night for precious minutes. The Emberfell pack believed it was the moon goddess's way of reminding wolves that even the brightest light needed darkness to exist. The ceremony grounds were decorated in silver and black, and over 600 wolves gathered to witness the rare celestial event. Nyx stood at the back of the crowd, as always. Her gray dress marked her as Omega, and the way shadows seemed to cling to her kept others at a distance. She'd learned to control it somewhat over the years, to keep the darkness from responding too obviously to her emotions, but during an eclipse when shadow and light merged, her control was tenuous at best. She felt it the moment the moon touched the sun, felt the shift in the air, the thinning of the veil between worlds, the shadows growing stronger and more aware. And she felt something else, a pull, a recognition, a bond forming with devastating inevitability. No, not him. Anyone but him. Alpha Rowan Ashcroft stood on the central platform, handsome and powerful, radiating authority. His scent of forest and embers and ozone and steel made every wolf present lower their heads in respect. At 28, he'd been Alpha for 3 years and had made it his mission to purge Emberfell of anything related to shadow magic. He'd executed 3 wolves for practicing it, exiled dozens more for showing sympathy to those with shadow affinities. And now the moon goddess had paired him with Nyx, with someone whose very essence was shadow. The bond snapped into place as the eclipse reached totality, as darkness swallowed the sun completely. Rowan's head whipped toward her, his eyes flashing gold in the darkness, recognition, horror, disgust. "Come forward," Rowan commanded, his voice sharp with barely contained fury. Nyx's legs moved before she could stop them, the Alpha command overriding her will. She stumbled through the crowd as wolves parted, their faces showing shock and revulsion. When she reached the platform, Rowan's scent wrapped around her, and the bond pulled insistently. "Nyx Shadowin," Rowan said, his voice dripping with contempt. "The Omega touched by shadow, the one who walks with darkness." He turned to address the pack. "The moon goddess has made a grave error. Or perhaps this is a test, to see if I'm strong enough to reject what should never have been offered." The bond pulsed between them, and Nyx felt her wolf, silent for 26 years, suddenly stir. The shadows around them deepened, responding to her rising panic. "I have spent 3 years purging this pack of shadow taint," Rowan continued. I will not undo that work by accepting a mate who embodies everything I've fought against. Shadow magic nearly destroyed our kind during the Dark Age. It corrupts, it consumes, it turns wolves into monsters. I've never practiced, Nick started, but Rowan's hand shot up, silencing her. The shadow clings to you. I can see it, even now, growing darker around you during this eclipse. His steel-gray eyes blazed with something like fear masked as hatred. You are tainted, Nick Shadowin, and I will not let that taint spread to me or my pack. Time stopped. I, Rowan Ashcroft, Alpha of the Emberfell Pack, reject you, Nyx Shadowin, as my mate. I sever this bond by my own will and authority. You are not worthy of standing at my side. You are tainted by shadow, touched by darkness, and I will not risk the corruption of my bloodline or my pack. You are cast out. The pain hit like a physical blow. The bond that had barely begun to form shattered, and each fragment felt like it was tearing through her soul. But worse than the pain was the power surge. The magical bindings that had been placed on her at birth. Bindings, meant to suppress her shadow affinity, cracked under the strain of the severed bond. Shadows exploded outward from Nyx, plunging the ceremony grounds into darkness deeper than the eclipse. Wolves screamed, some shifted in panic, others ran. "Seize her!" Rowan shouted. "She's using shadow magic. This proves she's corrupted." But Nyx couldn't control it. The shadows poured from her like a dam breaking, responding to her pain and fear and rage. Guards rushed forward, but the darkness pushed them back. "Get her out of here," Rowan commanded. "Beyond pack borders, now!" Strong hands grabbed Nyx, and she felt something slam into the back of her head. Pain, darkness, then nothing. When Nyx regained consciousness, she was lying at the edge of the Wraithwood, a forest so dark and tangled that even hunters refused to enter. The guards had dumped her at the boundary and fled. The pain from the severed bond throbbed through her chest, but it was different from what she'd expected. Not just pain, but power. The shadows that had always whispered to her were screaming now, demanding release, offering her strength if she'd just let them in. No, Nyx thought desperately. Shadow magic is forbidden. It corrupts. It destroys. But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie. The shadows didn't feel evil. They felt natural. Like they were part of her, like suppressing them had been the real corruption. Nyx tried to stand, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The magical bindings breaking had released her power, but it was too much too fast. Energy surged through her system with nowhere to go, building and building until she thought she might explode. She needed help. Needed someone who understood shadow magic, who could teach her to control it before it consumed her. But everyone who practiced shadow magic had been hunted down, executed, or exiled. There was no one left who could help her. "You're going to die here," Nyx thought distantly, rejected and alone, killed by the very power that was always meant to be yours. A storm rolled in. Dark clouds that seemed to absorb what little light remained after sunset. Rain began to fall, cold and relentless. Nyx crawled forward, looking for shelter, and found an ancient stone structure half buried in the forest. A temple, perhaps, from before the Dark Age. She dragged herself inside and collapsed on the stone floor. The shadows inside were thick enough to touch, and they pressed against her skin like living things. For the first time in her life, Nyx stopped fighting them, stopped pushing them away, let them in. The shadows wrapped around her like a blanket, and the pain eased slightly. Her heartbeat slowed, her breathing grew shallow. This is it, she thought. This is how I die. Embraced by the darkness everyone feared. But as consciousness began to slip away, she heard them. Footsteps, paw steps, forms moving through the darkness with purpose. Nyx forced her eyes open and saw them emerging from the shadows themselves. Not walking from the forest, but materializing from the darkness. Massive wolves with eyes that glowed obsidian black like captured starless night. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 enormous wolves surrounded her, their presence radiating ancient power. But unlike every other wolf Nyx had ever encountered, these ones didn't recoil from the shadows that clung to her. They seemed to welcome them, to be made of them. "You're safe," a voice said, and a man stepped from the shadows, literally stepped out of darkness made solid. He was tall and powerfully built, with scars that spoke of countless battles. His hair was black with threads of silver, and his eyes glowed with that same obsidian black light. His scent, aged oak and winter snow and pine and storm, cut through her pain-hazed mind, but underneath it was something else. Shadow. Pure, undiluted shadow magic that should have terrified her, but instead felt like coming home. "My name is Magnus Shadowbane," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "I am, or was, the Alpha King of the Shadow Throne, ruler of all wolves who bear the gift of darkness." He knelt beside her, and she saw that his face was drawn, his body weakened despite his obvious power. "These are the Nightbound, my elite guard, and we've been searching for you for 26 years, Nyx Shadowin. The Shadowborn Queen has finally awakened." "I'm dying," Nyx whispered, because it seemed important to mention. "You're transforming," Magnus corrected gently. "The rejection broke the bindings on your power. Your shadow magic is awakening, but you don't know how to control it yet. It's overwhelming your system." He placed a hand on her forehead, and cool power flowed from the touch, shadow meeting shadow, recognizing, balancing. "But we can help. We can teach you, if you're willing to embrace what you are." "Shadow magic is forbidden," Nyx said, the words automatic after a lifetime of warnings. "It corrupts, it destroys." "Shadow magic is misunderstood," Magnus replied, and she heard bone-deep weariness in his voice. "Yes, it was misused during the Dark Age. Yes, some wolves were corrupted by it, but that was because they tried to take it by force, to steal power that wasn't meant for them. True shadow magic, the kind you were born with, is a gift from the moon goddess herself. Balance. For every light, there must be darkness. For every day, a night. You are that balance, Nyx." "Then why are you dying?" Nyx asked, because even through her pain she could sense it, the wrongness in him, the way shadows seemed to be consuming him from within. Magnus's expression darkened. "Because 26 years ago, when I realized the packs were hunting everyone with shadow magic, I made a choice. I used forbidden magic, not the clean shadow magic you were born with, but stolen power, corrupted power, to create a sanctuary for those being hunted. It saved hundreds of lives, but the stolen magic is eating away at my soul. I'm dying, Nyx, slowly but inevitably. Unless what? Unless the Shadowborn Queen rises and uses her clean, uncorrupted shadow magic to burn away the taint in my soul." He smiled sadly. "The prophecy said you'd come, but I never imagined you'd arrive already awakening. We have so little time." One of the wolves shifted, a woman with silver hair and obsidian eyes. Her scent was jasmine and midnight. "I'm Ember, second of the Nightbound. You need to rest, my queen. Your body is trying to adapt to the power surge. Let the shadows sustain you, and when you wake, we'll begin your training." "Training?" Nyx asked weakly. "To become the Shadowborn Queen," Magnus said. "To master shadow magic, to save my life and restore balance to our kind." His obsidian eyes held hers. "And to show the world that darkness isn't evil, it's necessary. Will you let us help you, Nyx?" Nyx looked at this dying king, at the 10 massive wolves who'd surrounded her with protective intent, at the shadows that no longer felt like enemies but like extensions of herself. She'd spent her whole life being told that what she was wrong, evil, corrupted. But what if they'd been lying? What if shadow magic wasn't the curse she'd been taught it was? "Trust them," her wolf urged, stronger now. "They're ours, and we are theirs." "Yes," Nyx whispered. "Help me." Magnus smiled, and for a moment she saw past the dying king to the powerful alpha he must have been. "Good. But first you need to survive the awakening. Nightbound. Protect your queen." The 10 massive wolves pressed closer, their body heat mixing with the cool embrace of shadows. Nyx felt consciousness slipping away again, but this time, it wasn't death pulling her under. It was transformation. Nyx woke in a place that shouldn't exist. The Obsidian Keep, they called it. Magnus's sanctuary, hidden between the mortal world and the realm of shadows. It existed in eternal twilight, where darkness and light merged into something neither and both. Buildings carved from black stone rose from a valley shrouded in mist, and shadow vines grew up the walls like living darkness. Welcome to your kingdom, Magnus said when she found him in the main hall. He looked worse than he had in the Wraithwood, paler, weaker, the shadows under his skin more visible. Or it will be once you claim your full power. Nyx sat across from him, her body still aching from the awakening. Tell me about the prophecy, about what I'm supposed to be. Magnus gestured to ancient texts spread across the table. The prophecy speaks of cycles, every 500 years when the balance between light and shadow tips too far toward light, darkness begins to die. And when darkness dies, balance is lost. The world needs both, Nyx. You can't have one without the other. But the Dark Age was caused by wolves who tried to steal shadow magic, to corrupt it for their own gain, Magnus interrupted. They weren't born with it, like you were. They took it by force, and it twisted them, made them monsters. That's why shadow magic was forbidden, not because it was inherently evil, but because most wolves can't handle it safely. He pointed to a text covered in elegant script. But every 500 years, a wolf is born with pure shadow magic running through her veins, a wolf who can wield darkness without corruption, a wolf who can restore balance. His obsidian eyes held hers, the Shadowborn Queen. You, Nyx. And the part about saving your soul? Magnus's expression grew pained. 26 years ago, I was the Alpha King of all wolves, not just those with shadow magic. I ruled fairly, maintaining balance. But then the purges began. Alphas like Rowan convinced other packs that shadow magic was evil, that anyone who practiced it needed to be eliminated. I watched wolves I'd known for centuries be executed for crimes they didn't commit. He stood and paced, his movements weakening with each step. So I made a choice. I used a forbidden ritual, one that steals shadow magic from the void itself, from the space between worlds, to create this sanctuary, a place where those being hunted could hide. But stolen shadow magic is poisonous. It corrupts from within. It's been eating away at my soul for 26 years, and now, he looked at her, now I'm dying. The corrupted magic has spread too far. Unless it's burned away by pure shadow magic, I have maybe 3 months left. And I have this pure shadow magic? Nyx asked. You do. You were born during a shadow eclipse, when darkness swallowed light completely. Your eyes glowed obsidian before you could even speak. Shadow magic responded to you instinctively. He returned to his seat, clearly exhausted. Your parents bound your power to protect you from the purges. They thought if your magic was hidden, you'd be safe. But suppressing shadow magic for so long, it's why the awakening is so violent. 26 years of power trying to emerge all at once. Who else has this power? Nyx asked. Who were the previous Shadowborn queens? Magnus smiled. You'll meet one soon. Your grandmother, actually. She was the last Shadowborn queen, 500 years ago. Shadow magic users can extend their lives if they're powerful enough. She's been waiting for you. Before Nyx could process that revelation, a woman appeared in the doorway, literally appeared, stepping out of shadows. She was ancient and beautiful, with long black hair shot through with silver and eyes that glowed obsidian bright. Grandmother? Nyx breathed. Hello, little shadow, the woman said, her voice like silk over steel. I'm Noctua Shadowin, and it's time you learned what you truly are. The training began immediately, because Magnus's time was running out. Noctua explained that shadow magic had 3 primary aspects: manipulation, walking, and healing. Manipulation lets you control existing shadows, Noctua demonstrated by making the shadows in the room dance and shift. You can use them as weapons, shields, or simply to move unseen. Walking lets you step through shadows themselves, traveling instantly from one dark place to another. She vanished and reappeared across the room. Extremely useful for escape or infiltration. And healing. Noctua's expression grew serious. Healing is the most important and most dangerous. Pure shadow magic can burn away corruption, cleanse tainted souls, restore balance. But it requires you to touch the darkness directly, to let it flow through you. If you're not careful, you can absorb the corruption yourself. Nyx spent days learning to manipulate shadows, making them lengthen, darken, move at her command. It came naturally, like breathing. The shadows responded to her will without resistance. Shadow walking was harder, The first time she tried, she ended up stuck halfway between worlds, her body partially solid and partially shadow. Magnus had to pull her back. "You're thinking too hard," he said, his breathing labored. "Shadow walking is about instinct. You don't force yourself through. You let the shadows take you. You trust the darkness." By the second week, Nyx could walk through shadows with ease, appearing and disappearing at will. The Nightbound watched her progress with pride and reverence. She met each member of Magnus's elite guard, Magnus Shadowbane, the dying Alpha King, aged Oak and Winter Snow, carrying stolen shadow magic that was killing him, Ember Nightwhisper, second in command, Jasmine and Midnight, fierce and strategic, Raven Darkbane, the assassin, Smoke and Steel, silent as death, Selene Shadowborn, the healer, Sage and Darkness, with deep knowledge of shadow magic's effects, Theron Voidwalker, the Shadow Walker, Cedar and Void, who could navigate the spaces between worlds, Lyra Nightsong, the Bard, Roses and Twilight, keeper of shadow magic's true history, Cain Obsidian, the Weapons Master, Leather and Shadow, deadly in combat, Vera Starless, the Seer, Moonless Night and Spice, who saw visions in absolute darkness, Brennan Duskfall, the Tracker, Earth and Dusk, who could follow trails through shadow itself, Zara Shadowheart, the youngest at 400 years, Pine and Darkness, with an easy laugh despite the grim circumstances. They became her family, her teachers, her protectors, and through it all, Magnus grew weaker. "You need to shift," Noctua said on the third week. "Your wolf is awake, but she needs to be fully realized before you can attempt the healing. Shadow magic in human form is one thing. Shadow magic in wolf form is exponentially more powerful." The full moon rose, ironic, given that Nyx wielded shadow, and the Nightbound gathered in the keep's central courtyard. Magnus watched from a window, too weak now to stand for long. "Let your wolf out," Noctua instructed. "Don't fight the transformation. Let the shadows guide it." Nyx closed her eyes and reached for her wolf. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready for 26 years, her wolf replied. "Let me show you what we truly are." The shift began, and it was nothing like Nyx had imagined. Her bones didn't snap. They flowed like liquid shadow, reforming with the fluid grace of darkness made solid. Fur emerged, black as midnight and shimmering with an iridescent sheen that made it look like captured starlight against void. Power built inside her, but it wasn't harsh or painful. It felt like the comfortable weight of darkness, the cool embrace of night, the absolute certainty of shadow. Nyx's body grew larger, and larger, and larger. When the transformation completed, she stood on 4 legs and opened eyes that glowed obsidian black. Even the massive nightbound wolves looked small beside her. She was enormous, mythic, a wolf that shouldn't exist, pure shadow given form. The nightbound bowed their heads in absolute reverence. "She is the shadow-born queen," Noctua whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The prophecy is fulfilled. Our salvation has risen." Nyx lifted her massive head and howled, a sound that resonated in both the physical world and the realm of shadows. Every wolf with even a trace of shadow magic would have felt it. Every wolf would know that balance was being restored. Magnus appeared in the doorway, barely able to stand, but smiling. "Beautiful," he breathed. "You're everything the prophecy promised." Nyx shifted back to human form, the transformation now as easy as breathing. "Then teach me how to heal you. Show me how to save your soul." "It will be dangerous," Magnus warned. "The corrupted magic in my soul will fight you. Try to corrupt you. You'll have to burn it away with pure shadow magic while resisting its attempts to taint you." "I don't care about the danger," Nyx said firmly. "You saved hundreds of lives by creating this sanctuary. You're dying because you protected others. I'm not letting that sacrifice be for nothing." But before they could begin the healing, Brennan appeared in the courtyard, his scent sharp with alarm. "We have a problem. A scout from Emberfell has found the keep." The scout was brought before them, a young beta female whose eyes widened in shock when she saw Nyx. "You're supposed to be dead," the scout stammered. "Alpha Rowan said the Wraithwood would kill you." "Clearly he was wrong," Nyx replied calmly. "What message were you supposed to deliver when you found me?" "Alpha Rowan, the pack is suffering. Strange things are happening. Shadows are growing darker, lights are failing, wolves are having nightmares. He thinks you're cursing us with shadow magic. He's mobilizing a war party to find you and," she swallowed hard, "to execute you for using forbidden magic." "I'm not cursing anyone," Nick said. "The shadows are responding to the imbalance. By purging shadow magic from his territory, Rowan tipped the scales too far toward light. The darkness is trying to restore equilibrium." "There's more," the scout said quietly. "There's a witch traveling. With them. Morena Bloodthorn. She claims she can sense shadow magic and destroy anyone who wields it. She's already killed 3 wolves from other packs who showed shadow affinities." Nyx felt her wolf stir with protective fury. Let them come. Let them see what happens when they try to eliminate balance itself. "Let her go," Nyx told the Nightbound. "Tell Alpha Rowan I'll be waiting, and tell Morena Bloodthorn that if she wants to test herself against true shadow magic, she's welcome to try." The scout fled, and the Nightbound prepared for war. "You're not ready," Magnus protested weakly. "You haven't finished your training. You haven't learned shadow combat. You—" "I have enough," Nyx interrupted gently. "And you're running out of time. After I deal with Rowan, I'm healing you. No arguments." Magnus smiled despite his obvious worry. "You've grown so much in 3 weeks, from frightened Omega to confident Queen." "I had good teachers," Nyx replied, looking at him with affection that had grown into something deeper. "And a king worth saving." They arrived 5 days later, over 300 wolves, led by Rowan's unmistakable forest and embers scent. But there was another scent too, cinnamon and iron, and something acrid that made Nyx's nose wrinkle. Blood magic, witch magic. Nyx stood at the keep's entrance with the Nightbound, flanking her in human form. She wore black leather that seemed to absorb light, and her obsidian eyes glowed softly in the eternal twilight. The Emberfell wolves emerged from the surrounding forest, moving in tight formation. At their head walked Rowan, and beside him was a woman with crimson hair and cruel eyes, Morena Bloodthorn, whose scent of cinnamon and iron and blood marked her as dangerous. They stopped at the keep's boundary, unable to cross the shadow wards without permission. Rowan's expression showed shock as he took in Nyx's transformation. "Nyx Shadowin," Rowan said, his voice carrying alpha authority. "You are using forbidden shadow magic and causing harm to the Emberfell pack. I order you to surrender and face execution for your crimes." "I'm not using shadow magic to harm anyone," Nyx replied calmly. "The imbalance you're experiencing is caused by your own actions. You purged every wolf with shadow affinity from your territory. You tipped the scales too far toward light. The darkness is simply trying to restore balance." Morena stepped forward, her blood-red eyes assessing Nyx. "You reek of shadow magic, little Omega. Corrupted, tainted power that should never exist. I'm going to enjoy purging you from this world." "You're welcome to try," Nyx said. "But I should warn you, I'm not some untrained wolf dabbling in powers I don't understand. I am the Shadowborn Queen, heir to 500 years of shadow magic tradition, and you're standing in my territory." Morena laughed and began chanting, her hands glowing with blood-red power. "Let me show you what real magic looks like." She threw a bolt of blood. Magic at Nyx, a spell designed to burn away shadow magic and kill the wielder in the process. Nyx didn't even move. She simply raised one hand, and shadows rose up like a living wall, absorbing the blood magic and dissipating it harmlessly. "My turn," Nyx said softly. She called the shadows, and they answered. Darkness erupted from every corner of the keep, from every shadow cast by the eternal twilight. They wrapped around Morena like living chains, lifting her off the ground and holding her immobile. "You call shadow magic corrupted," Nyx said, walking closer. "But shadow magic is balance. It's the darkness that makes light meaningful, the night that makes day precious. You, on the other hand, use blood magic. Power stolen from the life force of others. That's true corruption." She gestured, and the shadows tightened. "I could kill you right now. Let the darkness consume you completely. But I'm not here to become the monster you think I am. I'm here to restore balance." The shadows released Morena, who collapsed to the ground, gasping. "You wanted proof of shadow magic's power?" Nyx addressed all the assembled wolves. "Here it is, the Nightbound. Show them what true shadow wolves look like." The 10 guards shifted as one, revealing their massive forms. But more than that, They demonstrated shadow walking, appearing and disappearing, moving through darkness itself, showing abilities that went beyond normal wolf powers. Then, Nyx shifted, and the assembled wolves gasped. Her massive form towered over everyone present, black fur shimmering with iridescent light, obsidian eyes glowing with ancient power. She didn't attack. She simply stood there, radiating the truth of what she was, not corrupted, not evil, but balanced, necessary. Right. I am the Shadowborn Queen, Nyx said, her voice resonating through both physical and shadow realms. I am the balance between light and dark. I am what the moon goddess intended when she gave some wolves the gift of shadow. Her glowing eyes fixed on Rowan. And you, Rowan Ashcroft, made a grave mistake. You didn't just reject your fated mate, you rejected balance itself. You tried to eliminate darkness from your territory, and in doing so, you endangered every wolf under your rule. Rowan shifted to his wolf form, but even as an alpha, he looked small beside Nyx's shadowborn form. Please, Rowan said, and his voice carried genuine fear for the first time. Mercy. The pack is suffering because of my choices. I was wrong to reject you, wrong to purge shadow magic, wrong about everything. Nyx looked at this alpha who had caused her so much pain. She could destroy him now, strip his rank, scatter his pack. The power was hers. But that wasn't who she was. That wasn't what the Shadowborn Queen represented. You're right. You were wrong, Nyx said. But destroying you doesn't restore balance. It just tips the scales in a different direction. She shifted back to human form and addressed all the wolves present. The age of fearing shadow magic ends now. The age of understanding balance begins. Rowan, return to your pack. Release any wolves you've imprisoned for shadow affinities, end the purges, and learn that darkness isn't your enemy. It's your complement. She looked at Morena, still sprawled on the ground. As for you, Morena Bloodthorn, you've killed 3 wolves for the crime of being born with shadow magic. You use stolen life force to power your spells. You're exactly the kind of corruption you claim to fight against. Shadows wrapped around the witch again. You're banished from all wolf territories. If you return, if you harm another shadow wolf, I will find you, and next time, I won't be merciful. The shadows carried Morena away, depositing her far beyond the keep's boundaries. Rowan bowed his head. Thank you, Shadowborn Queen, for your mercy and your wisdom. Don't thank me yet, Nyx said. You still have work to do, repairing the damage you've caused, making amends to those you've hurt, proving through actions that you've changed. As the Emberfell wolves retreated, one figure remained behind, a young Omega with shadow magic in her eyes. Can I stay? The girl asked quietly. I've been hiding what I am my whole life. I want to learn, to be safe. Of course, Nyx said gently. This sanctuary exists for wolves like us, for those who wield shadow magic and need a place where they won't be persecuted for it. Over the following days, more wolves arrived. Shadow magic users who'd been in hiding, wolves who'd been cast out for showing darkness affinities. Within a week, the Obsidian Keep's population doubled, but Magnus continued to deteriorate. It's time, Magnus said one evening, his voice barely above a whisper. I can feel the corruption reaching my heart. If we don't act soon, it'll be too late. Nyx had been preparing for this moment, studying with Noctua every day, learning the intricacies of shadow healing. But knowing the theory and actually doing it were very different things. Walk me through it again, Nyx said, her heart racing. Magnus lay on a bed of shadow-woven fabric, too weak to stand anymore. You'll need to shift to wolf form. Shadow magic is stronger in that shape. Then you'll call your power and let it flow into me. The pure shadow magic will seek out the corruption and burn it away. But the corrupted magic will fight back, Noctua added. It will try to taint you, to spread to you. You must hold firm to your own nature. Remember what you are. Pure shadow, uncorrupted, balanced. Don't let the stolen magic convince you otherwise. And if I fail, Nyx asked. Then we both die, Magnus said simply. The corruption will consume me, and the backlash will likely kill you too. But Nyx, I'm dying anyway. At least this way, there's a chance. Nyx shifted to her massive wolf form, and the Nightbound formed a protective circle around them. Noctua stood at Magnus's head, ready to intervene if something went catastrophically wrong. Nyx placed her massive paw on Magnus's chest and closed her eyes. She reached for her shadow magic, pure, clean, balanced, and let it flow. The moment her power touched Magnus's soul, she felt the corruption. It was like touching rot, like experiencing decay on a spiritual level. The stolen shadow magic had spread throughout his entire being, twisting what should have been clean power into something poisonous. "Burn it away," Nyx commanded her magic. "Purify, restore." Her pure shadow magic responded, flowing through Magnus like cleansing fire. But the corrupted magic fought back, just as Noctua had warned. It tried to latch onto Nyx's power, to spread to her, to convince her that stolen power was stronger than earned power. "You could have so much more," the corruption whispered. "Why settle for balance when you could have domination?" "Because domination isn't strength," Nyx replied firmly. "Because balance is what the world needs. Because I am the Shadowborn Queen, and I will not be corrupted." She poured more power into Magnus, her pure shadow magic overwhelming the stolen magic, burning away the taint. Magnus screamed, a sound of agony, as the corruption was forcibly purged from his soul. "Hold on," Nyx urged him, "just a little longer." The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Nyx's power against the stolen magic, purity against corruption, balance against chaos. And slowly, gradually, her magic won. The last of the corruption burned away, and Nyx felt Magnus's soul stabilize, felt clean shadow magic flow where stolen magic had once festered, felt him heal. She withdrew her power and shifted back to human form, exhausted but triumphant. Magnus lay still for a long moment, and Nyx's heart clenched with fear. Had she been too late? Had the purging killed him? Then his eyes opened, obsidian black and clear for the first time in 26 years. "You did it," he breathed. "By the goddess, you actually did it." Color returned to his face. Strength returned to his limbs. He sat up, moving with the fluid power of a healthy Alpha King rather than a dying man. "I can feel it," Magnus said, wonder in his voice. "The corruption is gone. My soul is clean, whole." He looked at Nyx with awe and something deeper. "You saved me. You mastered forbidden magic in 3 weeks and used it to save my life." "The magic isn't forbidden," Nyx corrected gently. "It's just misunderstood. You taught me that." Magnus stood and pulled her into an embrace. "I have waited 500 years to meet you, Nyx Shadowin. Every moment of that wait was worth it." Over the following weeks, Magnus regained his full strength. The Obsidian Keep flourished as more shadow wolves arrived, and Nyx discovered that her feelings for Magnus had grown beyond gratitude or respect into something that felt like love. "The prophecy never said anything about romance," Nyx told Noctua one evening. Her grandmother smiled. "The moon goddess doesn't dictate who we love. That's our choice. But I will say this, you and Magnus complement each other perfectly. Shadow and shadow, balance and balance. If you choose to be together, you'll be the most powerful pair the shadow world has ever seen." When Nyx finally told Magnus how she felt, he laughed with joy. "I've been in love with you since you walked through shadows for the first time," he admitted. "Since you risked corruption to save my life. Since you showed mercy to those who'd hurt you. You're everything a Shadowborn Queen should be, Nyx. And if you'll have me, I would be honored to stand at your side." They sealed their chosen bond under a moonless sky, shadows dancing around them in celebration, the Nightbound bearing witness to the union of their king and queen. 6 months after Nyx's awakening, the Obsidian Keep had become home to over 300 shadow wolves. The purges had ended. Packs across the territories were beginning to accept that shadow magic wasn't evil. It was necessary. Rowan arrived one day to formally apologize, bringing with him a dozen Omega wolves he'd previously banished for shadow affinities. "I was wrong," he said simply, "and I'm spending the rest of my life making amends." Nyx accepted his apology and welcomed the returned wolves to the keep, but Vera warned that darkness still threatened on the horizon. "An ancient evil stirs," the seer said, "something that feeds on the imbalance between light and dark, something that was strengthened by the centuries of shadow magic persecution. It's coming, my queen, and when it does, you'll need every bit of your power to stop it." "Then we'll be ready," Nyx replied, standing on the keep's highest tower with Magnus at her side. "Because I'm no longer the frightened Omega who was rejected and cast out. I'm the Shadow-born queen, and shadows answer to me." Magnus pulled her close. "Whatever comes, we face it together. King and queen, shadow and shadow, balance incarnate." Nyx smiled and let shadows dance at her fingertips. She'd stolen forbidden magic to save a dying king's soul. She'd mastered powers that had been banned for 1,000 years. She'd built a sanctuary for those the world feared and misunderstood, and she was just getting started. And so, Nyx's journey from rejected Omega to the Shadow-born Queen teaches us that what the world calls forbidden might be exactly what it needs. She learned that darkness isn't evil, it's balance, that shadow magic isn't corruption, it's necessity. That sometimes the thing everyone fears is the only thing powerful enough to save us all. Her story reminds us that being different isn't being wrong, that powers others condemn might be gifts in disguise, and that true strength comes from embracing what we are rather than hiding it. It shows us that stolen power corrupts, but power freely given, power that's naturally ours, can heal even the deepest wounds. But Nyx's tale is far from finished. What happens when the ancient evil Vera warned about finally emerges? What price will Nyx and Magnus pay to defend the sanctuary they've built? And what will it cost when they discover that defeating this darkness might require both light and shadow working together, forcing wolves who feared each other for centuries to become allies? What did you think of Nyx's journey? Have you ever had to embrace something about yourself that others feared or condemned? How did you feel about shadow magic being portrayed as balance rather than corruption? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that their differences are their strengths. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the next chapter of Nyx's story is coming soon, and you won't want to miss what happens when shadows and light must unite against true darkness. Thank you for listening, for being part of this community, and for understanding that balance requires both light and dark. We'll see you in the next chapter.